This episode of Dark Dialogue contains disturbing content and is intended for mature audiences only. Listener discretion is advised. Today on Dark Dialogue, we dive deep into the murky lake of Danice Day's chilling case, where the shadows of betrayal, violence, and hidden truths lurk beneath the surface. What dark secrets will we uncover in the depths of this haunting mystery? What lays hidden in the cold, dark depths of the water? Welcome, listeners, to another gripping episode of Dark Dialogue, the podcast where we dive deep into the shadows of true crime, uncovering stories that haunt, provoke, and linger after each episode ends. I'm your host, John.
And I'm Angela, here to paint the scenes. The places where these stories unfold, sometimes beautiful, sometimes eerie, but always unforgettable. Tonight, we're taking you to the heart of the San Luis Valley in Colorado and across the state lines to Arizona for a case that's as heartbreaking as it is chilling.
That's right, Angela. Today, we're telling the story of Danice Day, a 19-year-old mother of two whose life was cut tragically short in 2002. This is the story of a young woman trying to rebuild her life, a family left in anguish, and a mystery that took 7 years to unravel. It's a case that hits hard, full of hope, loss, and the long shadow of betrayal.
And I'll be setting the stage, taking you to Monte Vista, Colorado, a small town nestled in the vast, rugged valley, and to Lyman Lake State Park in Arizona, where the truth finally came to light. These places are more than just backdrops, they're characters in this tragedy, shaping the story in ways you'll never forget.
So grab your headphones, settle in, and let's step into the darkness together. This is the story of Danice Day. In this episode, we invite you into the haunting story of Danice Day, a 19-year-old mother of two whose life was tragically stolen from her in 2002 in the small agricultural town of Monte Vista, Colorado. We'll take you with us on Danice's journey as we weave together her early years, marked by resilience and optimism, her deep love for her children, and the challenges she faced as a young woman striving to overcome personal struggles and build a brighter future. We'll dive into the events that led to her sudden and mysterious disappearance, a case that left her family in anguish and baffled authorities for years. Angela will set the stage, bringing to life the stark beauty and isolation of the San Luis Valley, where Monte Vista's quiet streets and vast fields hold an undercurrent of secrets. The Lyman Lake State Park in Arizona, a remote desert reservoir that played a pivotal role in unraveling the truth. Together, we'll explore a story that intertwines hope, heartbreak, and enduring strength of the family's quest for answers. Angela, I think you dug up some location information for this case, so I'm going to hand it off to you.
Well, I'll take it. So, yes, I did. Monte Vista has an interesting history and start to its current self. And that is if you can describe a town as self.
I think you can.
I did. I just went with it.
It's our show. We can describe it however we want.
Exactly. Amen. So it had a bit of an identity crisis in its beginning, as we've discussed in some other cases where towns were named things and changed.
Couldn't decide what they wanted to be called.
Yeah. So according to uncovercolorado.com, although the town had no singular founder, many early settlers paved the way for the future prosperity of Monte Vista. In 1881, the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad placed a small railroad structure with a water tank, storage for equipment, and a place for workers to sleep in Monte Vista. A few settlers began claiming land and setting up small businesses around this building. Henry Taylor purchased a large plot of land in 1882 that became known as the Lariat Town site. Then in February 1884, the Aldrich brothers purchased the Lariat Town site from Maurice Pelton for the Henry Town and Land. This site was the beginning of the new town of Henry, named after the ace promoter. It was incorporated on May 1st, 1884, platted, and building started at once. Each town deed included a no liquor clause.
Interesting.
So they were dry. Henry had borrowed more money than he could repay and suddenly left town and his debts. Some of us wish we could do that.
Don't we?
But we're not like Henry. So this leads us to July of 1885, when the Travelers Insurance Company of Hartford, Connecticut took over the Henry interests.
Interesting.
Right? They invested heavily in the town with land and buildings. They compromised with C.S. Aldrich, who had lost most of his investments by now, and made a request for Aldrich and Judge White to rename the town. By the time of incorporation on July 3rd, 1886, the town site was replatted and renamed for the mountain vistas surrounding it. The Spanish translation is Monte Vista.
All right.
So Monte Vista is the most populous municipality in the Rio Grande County, Colorado, which will lead me right into the census reporting.
Yeah.
Yay! 780 residents were reported in 1890 and grew to 4,247 residents in the 2020 census.
Yeah, when you said it was the most populous municipality,
right?
I was going to say that's not saying much over there because there is no big towns in that area. It's awesome over there. I love the western slope of Colorado.
I want to go hang out for a while.
A lot of cases down there.
We'll probably be there then. There are two interesting items to note about this area for very different reasons. One is that it is the host to the Crane Festival, where annually in early March, you can witness 20,000 sandhill cranes migrating to the wildlife refuge. And I can only imagine that is a sight to see and hear.
And I'm learning about this now. No.
I was going to say, sorry. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Now you have to go back.
Now we're going to have to go back.
Next March for 20,000 sandhill cranes.
That's got to be incredible.
Right?
I didn't know
Noisy.
I didn't know that their flyway was that far west. I thought it was a little bit farther east.
Well, I mean, I read it on the internet, and you know,
it's gotta
if it's on the internet, it's got to be true. So another thing I read on the internet is, on the other hand, for those of you who are not bird enthusiasts, Monte Vista has become famous for a certain starting off strong today.
Yeah, you are.
Monte Vista has become famous for a certain agricultural product some of you may be a bit more keen to. Coors Barley.
There you go.
The world's largest single-site brewery, Miller Coors, based in Golden, Colorado, relies on the farms around Monte Vista to produce special barley for its Rocky Mountain-style beer.
It's pretty incredible, too.
The beer or the valley?
What I was referring to was the brewery.
The brewery.
But that is a true crime case that we need to put on the list, because Adolph Coors, I think it was Adolph. I know Adolph is the one that started it, but one of his grandsons, who was a Coors, was kidnapped for ransom and killed in Golden, Colorado. Yeah. Very interesting story that we'll have to dig into one of these days.
Well, all right then. So I'm going to say cheers to that.
Cheers.
For some of you, because I don't drink, but
I have water.
I have water as well. Today, you can take a historic walking tour through downtown, where the streets are lined with historical buildings and lovingly preserved architecture. Monte Vista's old-fashioned downtown offers free parking, art galleries, antique and clothing shops, and an array of dining options, from taquerias to from-scratch bakeries. Local lodging ranges from high-end and eclectic to low-key and traditional, with bed and breakfasts, hotels, a retro motor lodge, and nearby campsites. Something for everyone.
Sounds like it.
So before you schedule that walking tour, I'm going to ask my partner in crime here to tell us more about this case. So are you ready, John? Tell us about this case.
Ready.
Bring it.
I had one comment about the location, though, is you have to wonder like when Henry or whatever his name was skipped town, if everybody was like, oh, good, that ass is out of here now.
Right.
Let's rename the town. We never liked that guy anyway.
But when he was there, it was Lariat. When he skipped, that's when they named it Henry, because it was the Henry
Oh, I guess I misunderstood that.
Company thing. Henry Town and Land Company, which is what I'm confused. I looked and looked and looked. I was like, why is it Lariat when Henry Taylor's there?
I guess he just didn't want to name it after himself.
And he purchased it from Maurice Pelton for the Henry Town, and that's why they named it Henry.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you for all of that information.
You're welcome.
So to tell Danice's story, we need to do like we always do and start at the beginning. So Danice Leigh Day was born on May 8th, 1982 in Laramie, Wyoming, to Rodney or Rod and Jonine Day. And she was the youngest addition to the family and the only child that Rod and Janine had, because Janine had two girls before the marriage, and those girls were named Julie and Jackie Flint. And like I said, they were from a prior relationship. I wasn't able to find exactly when Rod and Janine met and got married, but I think their marriage took place not long before Danice was born. So I'm guessing maybe 1980, 1981, somewhere around in there. But after her birth, the family had an idyllic Wyoming life for a little while. Danice fell into her spot in the family as the youngest girl, and it was said that she really seemed to enjoy life during this time. And I saw pictures of her, and she's fishing and camping, just like all the Wyoming little girl stuff. Yeah. And it's stuff that I can definitely relate to, and I'm sure you can too, having grown up just across the state from this area. Mm-hmm. And she was born in Laramie, but they lived in Medicine Bow. And I don't know if you've been to Medicine Bow, but it's a beautiful little spot. The river runs right down through town. They got a great little brewery and hamburger spot right downtown, and it's a pretty cool little town. I really like it over there.
I've only been to Laramie once for state drama in high school. Ooh, put a quarter in the Wayback Machine.
And I don't know, my personal opinion is Laramie is not much to brag about, but Medicine Bow is pretty awesome.
Bypass Laramie, we'll go to Medicine Bow.
There you go. So it's, like I said, it's a beautiful spot. There's great camping over there. There's good fishing and hiking. It's a great outdoor spot. And there's a lot of kayaking and stuff that takes place in the river right down through there too. So Danice attended Medicine Bow Elementary School in Medicine Bow, Wyoming during her early childhood. So likely from ages 5 to 10, that I'm guessing, or roughly 1987 to 92. And Medicine Bow Elementary School is part of the Carbon County School District and serves a small student population with a population of less than 300 total. The school would have been extremely small and intimate classroom setting. So as a student, Danice would have been part of that close-knit classroom where teachers and peers likely knew each family very well. Her attendance at Medicine Bow Elementary suggests the family valued education. And I wasn't able to find much information on these years of her life, but she was described as very smart and extremely artistic. And from what I've learned about her, I suspect that during this time, she was a good and focused student that probably enjoyed school. Danice was described as having a, quote, bright, beautiful, positive spirit, and being an optimist who cared about people's feelings and didn't like to trouble others with her problems. And these traits likely emerged during her elementary school years, making her a beloved figure among peers and teachers. So she formed a close-knit group of friends in Medicine Bow and then later in Laramie, showing that she was sociable and adept at building relationships despite the small size of Medicine Bow. Her forgiving nature, noted by her mother, Janine, suggests that she handled family tensions with emotional resilience, even as a young child. Janine's comment about Danice giving, quote, the best and longest hugs points to a warm, affectionate personality that likely endeared her to her classmates and her teachers and probably everybody that met her.
Can you all just think of that one person that just gives the best and longest hugs? Because there is one for everyone.
There is one for everyone. Yep. And I couldn't learn very much at all about the family dynamics during this period. From some of the stuff that happens later, I do have my suspicions. However, no matter what the cause, her idyllic Wyoming life came crashing down sometime in 1989 because that's when her parents, Rod and Janine, divorced.
Oh. After the divorce, it was said that Rod needed to get away. I don't know what that means exactly or what he needed to get away from, but he moved to Colorado at this time. And I will say that Rod seems like a really good guy, and Janine would have definitely had her issues, so I suspect that probably it had something to do with him leaving. Jonine or Janine?
It's, I don't know. Jonene. It's probably Jonine.
Jonine. With Danice already in the house with her older sisters, it may have made the most sense for her to stay there with their mom. I don't know and wasn't able to find any custody disputes with Rod trying to get custody, so I suspect that maybe Danice made the decision to live with her mom. No matter how it came to pass, Danice lived with her mom after the divorce, and Janine was a train wreck. I'll know some of those too.
Oh, yeah.
That isn't just me saying that either. Janine would agree, saying, quote, I was a terrible mother. I got into meth and alcohol, and she could be gone with her friends for days at a time. I wouldn't leave enough food in the house for them to eat. You know, I spent money that we didn't have. I quit jobs that we needed. She didn't have any supervision from me, end quote. My heart really breaks for Danice during this period because it seems as though she had to become an adult in the house, the adult in the house. In spite of her mom and her chaotic family life, Danice still was able to maintain good grades. Her passion was in the arts, and she was a particularly talented writer. When she was 15, she was able to get a poem published in a literary journal. That's cool.
It's very cool.
Her sister Jackie said that she was just really creative. I mean, she was always drawing from a young age, just really smart, and learned to read and write really young. I think writing was a way for Danice to get through things that were going on with my mom at the time. When she lived with her, there was a lot of periods of time where it was her role to save my mom, end quote. So it isn't surprising at all, being an absolutely unsupervised adolescent and teen would have its own consequences. Those came in Danice's life in 1997, when she was 15 and found out that she was pregnant. I get the impression that Danice's dad, Rod, really beats himself up over not being there, maybe as much as he should have or could have been. I'm not about to judge him, though, because I have no idea what was going on in his life at the time or the dynamic between him and Janine.
And, you know, I gotta believe that with Janine being a meth head and an alcoholic and stuff, I mean, she had to be a freaking nightmare to try to deal with. And,
Right.
you know, there was the other two girls, which he had no prayer of getting custody of. So it was a tough situation for him.
Yeah, cases like this make me concerned that people always immediately go to the mom in custody.
And in Wyoming,
is.
especially, it's still really bad that way, but it was even worse back then.
Yeah. I do know, though, that as soon as he learned Danice was pregnant, he went to Wyoming, picked her up, and brought her to live with him and his new wife, Judy. This move proved to be great for Danice at first. She gave birth to a son, whom she named Joshua, sometime in 1998. With her dad and stepmom's help and support, Danice's life finally gained a semblance of stability following the chaos of living with her mom. She got into a program in Monte Vista and completed her GED. Good on her. From all accounts, she was a fabulous mom. Her dad saying that, quote, she cherished her baby. She was a very good mom. He was just part of her. And she would have fought you tooth and nail if you crossed her kid. End quote. And amen.
Yep.
Danice also got a job in Monte Vista working as a waitress at a Mexican restaurant called Dos Rios Restaurante. With the help of Rod and Judy, Danice was able to start meeting people in Monte Vista and begin having a social life.
So in 1999, after she'd been in Monte Vista for about a year, Danice met a douchebag named Victor Braun at a party.
Right out the gate with the douchebags.
Oh, this guy is such an asshat. There's going to be a lot of that in this episode. I warn you, because I really, really hate a couple, 3 or 4 people that's involved in this story. So, yeah, you know.
Well, it's a good thing we're supposed to hate them, so.
Yeah. So, Victor douchebag Braun was born in 1975. And I couldn't find his exact birthday, and frankly, I really don't care about this piece of shit at all. But as near as I could tell, he grew up in Monte Vista, but little is known about his family beyond his douchebag father, who would become a part of this story later.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Oh no, it's a family of douchebags, that is for sure. So Victor likely went to school in or near Monte Vista, learned to be an asshat in Monte Vista.
You guys. Okay, I'll zen over here.
No, you're fine, because this shit stain just gives Monte Vista a bad name all the way around. So whatever the reason, unfortunately, Danice and Victor hit it off and started spending a lot of time together. So within 6 months of meeting Victor, Danice discovered that she was pregnant again, and this time he was the father.
So I've seen some GED classwork.
Uh-huh.
They don't teach you how to recognize douchebags.
No, unfortunately, they
do
don't.
not.
No.
They do not.
So in late 2000 or early 2001, Danice gave birth to a daughter whom they named Kaylee. And being a father did not slow Victor down at all. And soon Danice and Victor were living a partying lifestyle.
Because she's how old at this time? 17?
Yes, something like that. She's pretty damn young still.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Interrupt all you want to.
Just jump in wherever.
But unfortunately, it wasn't long before Danice had become addicted to cocaine.
Oh, no.
And from what I understand, it was a pretty severe addiction, which most cocaine addictions are.
Yeah, you don't just casual cocaine.
Well, some people do. In the 80s, a lot of people did. But if you become, quote, addicted to cocaine, it's usually pretty bad.
But I'm going to stereotype. In southern Wyoming, it's generally not casual cocaine.
Yeah, and we're in mid Colorado now.
Oh, okay.
But to your point, in podunk little Monte Vista, Colorado, yeah, there's probably not a lot of,
right.
You hit a party and there's some cocaine on the table or something, but other than that, you never use it. Probably not a lot of that going on.
Oh, okay.
So, seeing that his daughter was really struggling, Rod sat her down like any good father would do, and he had a talk with her, and he said, quote, "Danice, you need some help." And that's an extremely uncomfortable conversation to have with a loved one. So I'm sure that he was nervous about what her reaction was going to be, but
she's going to leave. I'll never see the babies again.
Exactly. But she didn't. She just said, "Okay, when?" And to which Rod responded, "Right now." And so he got her into an inpatient facility where she spent a month getting clean and getting healthy. And during her treatment, it was made clear to Danice that she was too reliant on Victor. So when she got out, she got her own apartment, which she was extremely proud of. And I can just picture this. She's a young lady that really has never lived on her own before. I mean, granted, her mom just basically ditched her and she had to take care of herself. But as far as working and paying her own rent and having her own place and So
wanting to do those things with 2 children.
exactly. So, I'm sure she was extremely proud and with good reason to be. And I got the sense that it made her feel like she had accomplished something finally all by herself, and she's created a home for her children without relying on anybody else. I mean, obviously Rod and Judy were there to help, and they'd watch the kids as she needed and stuff like that.
Right. Safety net.
Yeah, they were great, but she really did this by herself, and she was proud of herself, and she should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand that feeling and the sense of pride that she felt for accomplishing it. I can also relate to how proud Rod must have been for his daughter to come out of rehab and start moving her life in a positive direction.
Damn straight.
Unfortunately, though, of all the bad habits that treatment helped her with, it did not change her opinion of Victor.
No.
So even with her new place, Danice would spend several nights a week at Victor's place. She did prefer her own place, though, and during this time, her dad said that, quote, she was on top of the world there for a while.
So we're going to take you to Christmas 2001, and I don't know if Danice's struggles and recovery inspired her mom, Jonine, or not, but I do know that by December 2001, both Danice and Jonine were clean together for probably the first time since the divorce in 1989. It was mentioned that both Danice and her mom had both just completed rehab after long stretches of addiction. Jonine having been addicted to meth and alcohol, and Danice to cocaine. They decided to get together in Wyoming for a big family Christmas. It was planned as a celebration for Danice and her mom, as their life had fallen into some major parallels. Jonine described it by saying, quote, "The fact that the whole family was there meant that we made a decision to be closer to our loved ones, pay more attention to what mattered," end quote. During that Christmas, Danice said she felt she was getting back to being herself after so long since she'd been sober. It sounds like it was a wonderful and special family Christmas, where the family got together not just to celebrate Christmas, but the new lives that lay ahead of them in 2002. After returning to Monte Vista from Wyoming in January, Danice went back to her job at the restaurant and seemed focused on continuing the positive changes she'd made in her life. Unfortunately, she maintained her relationship with Victor during this time. Their entire relationship was marked by significant challenges, primarily centered around Victor's behavior. Reports from Danice's family and friends, particularly her sister Julie Flint, highlighted that Victor was, quote, very possessive and very insecure. And
that's a trait that you see a lot investigating true crime. I just have to say. If you're a listener and your boyfriend or husband fits that, run.
Run now, run fast, run far.
Yes.
So it's also a trait that contributes to an unhealthy dynamic. Julie Flint noted there were several signs of unhealthy behavior in their relationship, suggesting a pattern of control and potential domestic violence. Red flag.
Big red flag.
This possessiveness was a recurring theme, and Danice often found herself in a position where her autonomy was challenged. It was also noted that Danice, like so many battered women, would show up at places with bruises and black eyes. It was obvious to those around her that something was happening to her at home. Despite these difficulties, Danice was described as a resilient figure, maintaining an optimistic look. Julie Flint emphasized Danice was a huge optimist and nothing but positive, and did not like to be a burden on other people, indicating Danice's efforts to cope with the strain while protecting her loved ones from her struggles. However, the toxic environment would have certainly taken their toll on her.
And to just interject here again, I'm sorry, but, again, if you fit that profile and you feel that way, there's somebody you can reach out to that will help you get out of a situation. Don't feel like you're burdening them. Ask for help and get the hell out.
Yeah, you are not a burden. There are phone numbers. There are people email us.
Exactly. There's resources. You do not have to live like that.
On January 12th, 2002, Danice's father, Rod, received a phone call from Victor. Victor asked him if Danice was there and when was the last time Rod had seen her. Shocked, Rod said no, Danice was not there, and he was confused because he'd thought she had been with Victor. This obviously threw him into a panic, and he asked Victor when the last time was that he'd seen Danice. While the exact content of the phone call is not detailed in the sources, it can be reconstructed based on the circumstances. Victor contacted Rod Day to inform him that Danice had not returned home since January 9th, 2002, 3 days before. He also stated that on that previous Wednesday, they had gotten into an argument. He told Rod that she had left after their argument, possibly with someone else, as he claimed. This call was a critical moment as it prompted Rod to take action by reporting Danice missing to the Rio Grande County Sheriff's Department on the same day. Rod's statements and later reports reflects his anger and frustration, suggesting the call left him in a state of shock and urgency. Would me too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you have daughters.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah, this is a fear I think every dad has that has daughters. I mean, you have that fear with sons too, because bad stuff happens to boys, but
yeah.
With daughters, it's constant, and my daughters are pretty much all growing, and it doesn't ever go away.
No.
It doesn't ever get better.
It never will.
You know?
Mine's grown, and I still look at him and see 5-year-old sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's just, they're your babies.
I will say that my oldest married a super freaking stellar dude. And so that does give a dad a lot of comfort, because I know that he's the kind of guy that would die to protect her. So that's definitely comforting.
That's a big help. So the call's timing, 3 days after Danice's disappearance, makes it clear that Victor waited a substantial length of time before reporting. This delay is notable as Danice's family, including Rod, found it unusual that she would leave without her children, Joshua and Kaylee, and without her essential belongings, as noted in various reports. The phone call thus served as a pivotal moment, bringing Victor's account to Rob's, changing his name now. Sorry, Rod. Bringing Victor's account to Rod's formal report and highlighting the tension and uncertainty surrounding Danice's whereabouts. After the missing persons report was filed, Rod started contacting the rest of the family members, and they began to get the word out about Danice's disappearance. During the same time period, Victor was also contacting members of Danice's family to inform them. Family sprung into action, making missing persons flyers and spreading them in every way they could think of. Rod reached out to every agency that he thought might be able to help, including the FBI and the CBI.
Which is the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, if you don't know that.
And on January 14th, 5 days after her disappearance, the Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office finally began moving their asses and opened an investigation. John's writing me fat asses to say nice. They started checking her credit cards, cell phone records, and began interviewing her friends and family. When they interviewed Victor, I'm going to guess it wasn't good. He claimed that on the night of January 9th, Danice had told him that she was going to go out with friends. He claimed that he questioned her about who she was going out with, but she said that she didn't want to tell him. She then got into her car and took off. In addition to friends and family, the investigators also interviewed her coworkers. The coworkers told them that the day that she disappeared, a man had left Danice an unusually large tip, making them wonder if this man was interested in her. They also told investigators that on the night of her disappearance, Danice had planned on telling Victor that she was breaking it off and leaving him.
The most dangerous time in a
Yes.
violent relationship.
Yes. Insert dun 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 here. The relationship dynamics between Danice and Victor were known to the police at the time. The undersheriff at the time of her disappearance was a man named Brian Norton.
Cool dude.
Cool dude? Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't have a middle name here, so I figured he was somewhat legit.
Some of the cops will, but not this guy.
Okay.
He's freaking stand-up, dude.
All right. Good job, Brian Norton, wherever you are. He has been called to their house on multiple occasions and said you'd see them together and they'd look happy. Other times, Danice had black eyes and would wear dark glasses to try to cover up the marks. Rod continued pressuring the sheriff's department for more help and more action on their part. But he was told the same bullshit that I've heard so many times. We have all heard so many times.
Yep.
And this is because Danice was an adult. She was allowed to go missing. I get that law enforcement receives a lot of calls for missing people, and often they return without any issues. But we get so freaking tired of hearing about them dragging their feet, only to find out later that the victim could have potentially been saved if the cops would have just acted quickly. How wrong is it to act quickly and find her and move on than to just, oh, she's an adult, she can go missing?
It's so infuriating. And
Especially now.
Yes, especially now. And I completely get it if you're dealing with somebody like her mom who is a meth head.
Well, yeah.
And would leave for, on days on end.
She's off scoring meth.
But Danice had her kids, and from all accounts, she was a really good mom. I know that Rod told the cops she would not have left these kids.
Right.
When you have the family that's saying, oh, no, she would not have done this, they have a responsibility to assume the worst. And if it works out for the best, great.
And that's exactly how it's supposed to go. But
I think so.
It doesn't go that way.
It almost never goes that way.
Considering the obvious domestic violence in the relationship between Victor and Danice, it seems pretty crazy to me that they didn't take this more seriously. The family felt the same frustration until they heard a rumor about an association between Sheriff Desi Medina and the Braun family.
So, okay, Angela, for your sanity, I've tried to wait as long as possible, but now it's time to discuss this. So, are you ready to get pissed?
I'm always ready to get pissed off.
Well, you're going to.
And I have things to throw, so let's do it.
Just don't throw them at me.
Well, that wasn't part of the deal.
So, the Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office has a pretty sparse website. So,
all right, I'm pissed.
Oh, it gets worse. So, I wasn't able to find a lot of information that I usually am able to, but research suggests that Desi Medina was first elected sheriff in Rio Grande County in 1987, and he was the sheriff when Danice went missing in 2002. I couldn't find any information about his law enforcement experience before his election, but it's pretty safe to assume that he was probably a deputy for the prior sheriff, maybe for some time before he became sheriff himself.
It's usually the way, isn't it?
And he must have maybe went to a lot of the same trainings and stuff as dipshit Ray in the Lauren Agee case.
Oh,
that sheriff.
Oh,
Patrick Ray. They must have gone to the same training because they're both dipshits.
Nice.
So,
she's in training.
As rumors are by nature, the rumor that Medina and Victor's father were friends was not verifiable. I couldn't find anything to substantiate that claim, but there are several things that point to this being true. Also, oftentimes, small town rumors like this one come from a truth that several people in the community know. And this is certainly the case here, as we are not talking about anything that's illegal or wrong at all. This isn't like some of the stuff that we talked about in Candace Hiltz's case where, there was some accusations that the cops were on the take and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the case here.
Oh, yeah, and collecting all those birthday invites.
Exactly, yes. And, sheriffs are allowed to have friends, and Medina's no different.
Are they really?
They really are. And he was friends with Victor's father, Vern, and there is nothing inherently wrong with that. When it affects his office's investigations, though, there's a hell of a lot that's wrong with that.
Yeah.
And it seems obvious that that was the case with dipshit Medina.
It's obvious that's the case in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
We're just trying to see how many times we can say the word case.
It's going to be a lot, I think. Yeah, I think it's going to be
Are we keeping count out there, people?
So because of his friendship with Vern Braun and Victor Braun, Sheriff Medina officially removed himself from conducting the investigation. And so that's
Shocked.
That's proof positive to me that he knew that the town knew about his friendship because he needed to, at least appear to distance himself from it.
It's going to look like trouble.
Yeah. So even with him making that move, Danice's family believed that something was still going on behind closed doors, and I do too, for the record. It seemed that
Duly noted.
At the very least, the investigation was considered much less important than it should have. And they also thought that Medina was helping and coaching the Brauns on how to navigate the investigation.
Oh, so he wasn't investigating, but now he's a freelance
Yeah, so
coach.
it really appears to me like he made this statement because he wanted it to appear like he was taking a hands-off approach. And then he was secretly meeting with his investigators behind closed doors and telling them how to handle it, and going and meeting with his buddies and telling them what was happening in the investigation. And
What the
all the wrong things, all the things you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's what this douchebag was doing.
What a snake.
So I think the events will prove that was the case with this. And it is absolutely insane that more wasn't done about it at the time. And cases like this are the ones that an agency like CBI needs to step up and step in and take over the investigation. That didn't happen, though, and Medina remained in charge of the Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office and therefore the Danice Day investigation. So I couldn't find exactly when this happened, but about the time that everyone was losing hope, the Sheriff's Office investigators received a tip in the case that directed them to Vern's girlfriend, a woman by the name of Tracy Williams. When they interviewed her, she claimed that on the 18th, Vern had told her, quote, "Tracy, Victor makes me sick. He hit Danice in the throat and killed her, and now we have to leave and get rid of some evidence," end quote. So if you're not following, dipshit Vern is dipshit Victor's dad. And so his girlfriend made that statement.
Well then.
So investigators immediately, obviously, got a hold of both Victor and Vern and had them come to the sheriff's office for questioning. So this is like a forewarning. You're about to get pissed if you're not already. You're going to get more pissed if you already are. So
the degree of pissiness is
it's going to continue to rise.
Okay.
Yeah. So when they get there, everything is handled like you would have expected. They are separated and they're questioned separately. Both Vern and Victor deny having...
Finally.
Yeah, it doesn't stay true. So both Vern and Victor deny having anything to do with Danice's disappearance. And investigators tell them about the tips that they had left town that night to dispose of evidence, and asked where they went. And both of them gave conflicting accounts about their whereabouts. So it was said that Vern was on the cusp of revealing everything when he asked if he could take a cigarette break. Now, I'm not a trained detective. I'm not a trained law enforcement investigator, but I know that when you get a person in that position, you keep pushing. And if all possible, you don't give them a damn break. And I have my suspicions that Medina's hands were definitely in their decision.
Yeah.
But that is only my own jaded opinion. That's not proven anywhere. But no matter what the reason why was, the investigators allowed Vern to go outside by himself for a cigarette. And I will say that if nothing else, because they're there of their own free will, they can get up and leave whenever they want. But if I'm an investigator, I'm probably keeping a pack of cigarettes in my desk.
Right.
And at situations like this,
There you go.
I'm going to become a smoker.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be like, Oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I could really use a cigarette, too. I don't smoke, but I would for that.
Yeah.
But
Hang it out.
didn't do that. They were just like, oh, yeah, go on down, have a cigarette, enjoy yourself. And they didn't follow him. And it's claimed that the investigating sergeant didn't know that Victor was outside alone at the same time. So regardless of if this was just an oversight, if it was incompetence, or if it was something more sinister, it doesn't really matter. It happened.
Yeah.
And so this allowed Vern and Victor to get downstairs and compare notes. What did they ask you? Well, what did they ask you? What'd you tell them? Well, I told them. So, yeah, what questions they were being asked and what each of their answers had been so that they could identify those points where they had agreed, but more importantly, where they hadn't agreed. So after finishing their break, they both went back to continue the questioning. And Vern may have been on the verge of spilling everything before the smoke break, but when he returned, it was a completely different story. When investigators began questioning him again, Vern makes an interesting statement to them, and that is, he says, if Victor did do anything, I don't want to be the one to bring him down. That information is going to need to come from him, which is an odd statement. And at the same time, Victor has also returned from his break, and now his story immediately changes. So he is now quick to explain why his account hadn't matched that of his father's. And he claimed that the reason for this lie was that he was on probation on that night in question, and he didn't want to admit that he had left the state without permission. So leaving the state would have been a probation violation, and he claimed that that was the reason for his lies. So now the investigators had missed their window to press Vern, and the father and son duo had a chance to get their stories straight, so the questioning hit a standstill. And the prosecuting attorney would later say, and this guy's a pretty stand-up dude as well, but he would later say, quote, "It was a loss. I mean, that was the closest I think we came up to that point. Vern Braun was about to give information, and when you're on the verge of getting this critical information, you don't stop. You forge ahead. You press. You get inside their comfort zone and get them to talk. That is just the way it's done." End quote. Investigators did ask the Brauns if they could search their home, and the Brauns gave them their consent. So for the first time in 2 weeks that Danice has been missing, investigators actually visit the last location that she was seen. And during the search, they found her cell phone, her purse, her jacket. Nothing was taken that showed that she was leaving for any length of time. And it was said that the temperatures on the night that she went missing were below freezing, and Danice hadn't even taken a jacket. So this and all her belongings were still at the house, and that proved to investigators that she wasn't planning on disappearing of her own accord. Law enforcement even brought in ATVs and cadaver dogs to search the area surrounding the Braun Ranch, hoping to find Danice, but they found nothing. And I gotta say, this is just another big screw up in this investigation, because pretty much everywhere, even with my frustration that it usually takes them a little time to get off their asses and do something, everywhere, once they do, the first thing they do is go to the last place that the victim was seen or that the missing person was seen and conduct a search. No, these dumbass waited 2 freaking weeks to do that.
That's not enough time to get rid of stuff.
Exactly. So the failures in the investigation to this point left the family feeling like they were getting no closer to getting any answers, or especially to finding Danice. They were frustrated and starting to lose hope. Rod said that he contemplated going and getting information from Victor his own way, but he knew that he would just end up in jail and unable to see his grandbabies grow up. And so, looking at this guy, I think he's a Wyoming native. At the very least, he's a Colorado native. I mean, he's my kind of guy. So yeah, I'm sure he was thinking of grabbing Victor and pulling his fingernails out one by one until he got the information that he needed. But he felt responsible to help raise his grandbabies, which, so when the family was thinking that things couldn't get any worse. And are you there? You think that can't get any worse? Or maximum pissed off shit?
I have not hit max yet.
Okay, well, it's coming. So the worthless piece of shit sheriff, Desi Medina, went to a commissioner's meeting. And I don't know for sure why he was there, but commissioners' meetings are pretty damn normal for a sheriff to attend because that's their boss, is the commissioners.
Right.
So I'm not surprised that he was there. What does surprise me, though, surprised the family and surprises everyone that learns about it, and that is what he said during this meeting. So dipshit Medina gets up before the commissioners and makes a shocking declaration in front of the whole panel of county commissioners.
Okay, pissed in 3, 2, 1.
Without citing any sources or giving any additional details, Sheriff Asshat Medina gives a lurid account of Danice's murder to the commissioners. His story of Danice's last night was recounted in stunningly graphic detail. He described how Victor killed Danice and disposed of her body. It's said that people in the room were understandably stunned and mystified as to how Sheriff Dipshit Medina could have possibly known this information. So within a day at the most, the dumbass sheriff's insane comments get back to poor Danice's family and friends, and they were obviously horrified by the comments, but they also worried that the stupid, insensitive comments may compromise the investigation for good.
Right.
They obviously worried that their hope of getting any justice for Danice was lost forever. And I would have agreed. So dipshit Medina is obviously a worthless bastard and in my opinion is absolutely corrupt, at least where the Brauns in this case is concerned. With that said, the Rio Grande County District Attorney's Office, like I said, that dude was a pretty freaking stand-up guy. So, and again, they get a big thumbs up from me. Because after the loudmouth dumbass sheriff opened his stupid mouth at the commissioners meeting, the district attorney said, quote, enough. They contacted dumbass Medina and said, quote, you know what? Enough is enough. We are taking over this case. This was reckless and we're going to handle it from now on.
Hear, hear.
So the district attorney's office found a case that had been completely mishandled. And unfortunately, because of that, there was no new evidence. There was finally someone looking into Danice's case that actually gave a shit, but there wasn't much that they could do to repair the damage that had been done. And the investigation again came to a standstill. Now, this next part is damn impressive.
Impress me.
So Danice's sister Julie had lost all faith in the investigators and obviously dumbass Sheriff Medina.
If any to begin with.
And she didn't see them making any headway in the case. And so she decided to take things into her own hands. So this brave young woman left Wyoming, traveled to Monte Vista, Colorado to look into things for herself. And she intended to conduct her own interrogation of Victor, saying, quote, I had the weirdest thought the whole time I was driving down there because it was very scary for me to go alone, end quote. Yeah.
Right.
She pushed through the fear, though, and arranged to meet Victor at a coffee shop. And Julie said of Victor that, quote, he was a nervous wreck and he didn't express any kind of empathy for our family, considering that he had just spent Christmas with us. He also told me that she had left with friends and that she had probably taken off with another guy that he didn't really know, end quote. She said that she left thinking that the family would be lucky if they ever found out what happened to Danice.
That's kind of how I feel at this point.
So, as happens in these cases, weeks turned into months. The investigation is stalled with no new leads coming in for the investigators to follow. In a hope that they could break through Monte Vista's wall of silence, Danice's family began having pleas for help and support published in the local papers. Jackie, Danice's other sister, created a website and kept everyone informed about what was happening in the case. She also hoped that it would serve to keep Danice's memory alive. Rod planned a candlelight vigil to mark the 1-year passing since anyone had heard from or seen his beautiful daughter, Danice. He hoped that this vigil would inspire someone to come forward with new information. His hope was that if the right person saw how much pain the family was in, it would give them the courage that they needed to tell what they knew. So a guy who I think becomes the single most important figure in this case happened to be there that night showing his support for the family. And that man was the then undersheriff Brian Norton, which I mentioned before. And Brian had decided that he was going to run for sheriff. And I couldn't find out if he was running against dipshit Medina or if that dipshit was retiring.
On his way out.
But either way, Brian wanted to try to fill that role. And so he decided that he was going to run for sheriff. And so at that vigil, he made his way up to shake Rod's hand and to offer his help. And as he shook Rod's hand, Norton promised that if he was elected sheriff, he would do everything in his power to provide answers to Danice's family. And to many people that run for office, the campaign promises made are soon forgotten. Brian Norton was not that kind of a person. Instead, he was the kind of person who, if he looked you in the eye, shook your hand, and made you a promise, he had every intention of keeping his word. Watching interviews of this guy, it reminded me of Walt Longmire for...
Fucking that a minute ago.
Yeah, he wears a cowboy hat all the time. That's part of his everyday uniform is his cowboy hat. And you can tell that this guy is just a straight shooter. He reminds me a lot of our sheriff here, Daryl. He's just that kind of guy. Just if he tells you he's going to do something, he's going to do it. He takes his job seriously, and he doesn't. If somebody else doesn't come along that can help him, he'll just do it himself. And so 3 weeks after the vigil for Danice, now Sheriff Brian Norton, because he did win that election, and 3 weeks after that vigil is when he took office, and he remembered the promise that he'd made that night, and he had every intention of keeping it. So he sat down in a meeting with Rod and assured him that he remembered his promise and told him that, you know, sometimes these cases that drag out, people start talking. Maybe they broke up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or got divorced or other loyalties have changed. And he's absolutely right. We've seen that in so many cases, you know. I'm not saying it's good for a case to go cold, but sometimes by going cold and enough time passes that people, they don't even like that person anymore.
They lose their ties.
Exactly. So Sheriff Norton takes over the case and he implements a plan to keep close tabs on dipshit Victor. But unfortunately, about that same time, Victor leaves town and heads for Kansas. Rod's focus was still on keeping his daughter's story in the forefront of everyone's mind, and so he organized a gathering commemorating each day Danice had been missing, and at this event, Sheriff Norton released 730 balloons, and Rod and the sheriff pleaded with the public at this event to come forward and share the information, anything that they knew.
I'm assuming the 730 balloons is how many days she was missing?
At that point, yeah. Unfortunately, though, the months turned into years. Sheriff Norton remembered his promise, but the investigation was at a standstill. Finally, in early 2007, dipshit Victor Braun moved his sorry ass back to Monte Vista. And
Why?
he moved back carrying some pretty serious baggage. And I don't mean boxes full of his worthless shit. He carried a severe drug addiction home with him from Kansas.
Damn it, Kansas.
And so the sheriff was now able to implement the plan that he had created after taking office. And he had his investigators keep a very close eye on Victor. As they do this, they witness a Victor whose addiction was spiraling completely out of control. So over the next year, Victor racks up a series of minor charges ranging from driving without a license to possession of drugs. With the cops watching very closely, this dumbass wasn't getting away with anything. I mean, I could just see these guys. Did you see that? He threw a gum wrapper down. Go bust him for littering. I mean, they were on this guy. They were trying to rack up every possible charge they could on this piece of shit.
And I'm feeling his every move was fueled by guilt.
Oh, yeah. You know it was. Well, I don't know. He was so strung out on drugs at this point, he probably didn't feel any guilt. I don't know if this asshole ever felt any guilt, honestly, but we'll get there. So they planned to, like I said, just keep racking up the charges on him until they had enough leverage to push him into sharing the fate of Danice. And this leverage came in April of 2007 when Victor was caught on tape on a burglary spree that included 7 stores in the Monte Vista area.
You're so pissed off, words are not even coming to you.
That's exactly what's happening, yes. So this dipshit was arrested and charged in at least 4 burglaries. One confirmed burglary that I was able to find some information on involved him stealing money from a Monte Vista auto parts store. And in addition to the burglary charges, Braun also faced drug charges, aggravated auto theft, suggesting that he may have stolen vehicles, possibly in connection with the burglaries. I couldn't really tell because some stuff happened with these charges that we'll get to, so there's not a lot of information about them. But he was also charged with 2 counts of attempted theft, separate from the auto parts store incident.
Goodness sake.
Indicating additional attempted crimes.
This guy was busy.
Oh, yeah. Like every freaking, drug-rattled piece of shit out there. And so by 2007 or early 2008, Braun was being held in the Rio Grande County Jail on these charges when he cooperated with authorities, revealing the location of Danice's remains in exchange for a plea deal. So as part of this agreement, prosecutors dropped 9 cases against him, including their 4 burglary charges, and would proceed with the manslaughter charge and 2 theft counts. So Sheriff Norton began working on Braun, meeting with him often and encouraging him to share what he knew about Danice's disappearance. And the sheriff said, quote, "It was frustrating because at times he wanted to talk, and then there were times that he'd go back to his cell upset with us, and I'd think, we're not going to get anywhere," end quote. And then in the fall of 2008, after the sheriff had been pressuring him to talk for more than a year, Victor finally agreed to participate in a plea bargain discussion. And the sheriff was working with the district attorney, and they made their first offer to this dipshit, which was he would plead guilty to first-degree manslaughter with a potential prison sentence of 6 to 12 years. Victor and his attorney rejected the offer. And a few weeks after that rejection, Victor's lawyer contacted the district attorney with a counteroffer. And this offer stipulated that Victor would agree to provide the information leading to Danice's recovery, but only if he was to serve no more than 6 years in jail. And so Again, this is what stand-up dudes in their positions do, and that is that the sheriff and the district attorney, who, like I said, both of these guys are cool as shit, they didn't just jump at the offer. They went and sat down with the family, and Rod's response was, quote, "I said, that ain't going to happen. He can rot in hell for all I care. I said, no, don't take that one. I'm not going to accept anything that's going to give him less time in prison than I have been waiting for my daughter to be found."
Exactly.
Because it's, 7 years, I think, at this point. And so the sheriff and the district attorney agreed, and they rejected Victor's offer. And more time goes by, weeks and then months. The district attorney and Victor's lawyer keep working to iron out the details of a plea deal that both sides could accept. And then on April 29th, 2009, the family finally gets some news. They are informed that Victor has agreed to lead sheriff's investigators to Danice's body. And in exchange, he would plead guilty to reckless manslaughter with a sentence of 6 to 12 years. As with all plea agreements, this one too would be subject to a judge's discretion. And in addition, all of Victor's drug and burglary charges would also be dropped. Now, I can imagine what the family must have gone through when they were faced with this deal. Obviously, they wanted justice for Danice, but they also wanted answers, and most of all, they wanted her.
Yeah.
And so even if it was just her body, they wanted to be able to give her a burial. And they were faced with a freaking impossible decision. And they decided in the same way that I think I would. I mean, you can never put yourself into a position like that. If you haven't experienced it, you have no clue. But I do think if I was put into that situation, my primary focus would be on getting my baby back. And yes, I would want justice, but more than that, I would want to know where my daughter was.
Yeah.
And so the family agreed to the terms of this deal so that they could finally lay their daughter, sister, and mother to rest. Surprisingly, but also because he had no choice, dipshit Victor kept his word. So on the day that Victor signed his plea agreement, he began to provide Sheriff Norton with answers to questions that had been unanswered for 7.5 years.
Wow.
So he explained that he had welded Danice's body into a blue oil drum, driven her to Arizona, and thrown her in a lake. He never confessed to murdering her. The best this total piece of shit coward could muster was to claim that her death was accidental. He claimed that he thought that she overdosed and died. He then decided to dispose of her body because he was afraid that DFS, or whatever it is there, DFS is the Department of Family Services in Wyoming. I don't know. I think in Colorado it's DFS. I know in other states it's called other things, but these are the people that come take your kid when you're a piece of shit, druggy, worthless father. And so, but he was afraid that they would come take his daughter, which, God, they needed to. And she could, she could only have been so lucky as to be taken away from this asshat. Now, so dumbass Victor explains to Sheriff Norton that he had driven her body to Arizona and dropped the barrel into the middle of a lake. And Sheriff Norton asked the obvious question, and that is, which lake? And Victor responds that he didn't have a clue what lake it was. And so they were talking, and, they got out all these maps, and they're looking at lakes and stuff. And then Victor finally tells the sheriff that there was a guard shack that he remembered passing that night. And so they spent more hours looking at all the maps and identifying all the lakes that had guard shacks. And he finally chooses a spot. And the lake that Victor picked was the one that he remembered dumping Danice in. And that was Lyman Lake in Apache County, Arizona. And Angela, I think that you dug up some information on this area too, didn't you?
Just a little bit.
All right, so tell us about Lyman Lake.
Okay, so to begin describing Lyman Lake State Park, I will read a quote taken from the website azstateparks.com. Quote, created as an irrigation reservoir by damming the Little Colorado River, Lyman State Lake Park is a 1,200-acre park that encompasses the shoreline of a 1,500-acre reservoir at an elevation of 6,000 feet. It is fed by snow melt from the slopes of Mount Baldy and Escondida Mountain, the second and third highest mountains in Arizona. Water is channeled into the river valley from a 790 square mile watershed extending into New Mexico. End quote. Digging a little deeper into the history, I found reported that Lyman Lake State Park includes both pre-colonial Puebloan settlements dating back to at least 6,000 BC. The area was home to ancestral Puebloan who left behind archaeological sites and petroglyphs.
And they're awesome.
I want to see.
They're pretty cool.
These petroglyphs can be viewed along the Peninsula Petroglyph Trail and the Ultimate Petroglyph Trail. Park rangers offer hikes that occur several times a year, and they discuss these historic markings and the area.
We might have to take a dark dialogue trip.
Yes.
For research purposes to photograph the area and all that.
Dark dialogue explorers. Let's do it. The State Parks and Recreation Department maintains year-round visitor amenities. Due to the vast size of Lyman Lake, it is one of the few bodies of water in northeastern Arizona with no size restriction on boats.
That tells you how freaking huge this thing is.
Yeah, a wide variety of watercraft are also authorized in the park, such as canoes, kayaks, and jet skis. The west end of the lake is buoyed off and restricted as a no-wake area, meaning 5 miles per hour. This allows the angler a chance at the variety of fish without the proximity of speedboats and water skiers. The fishery consists of walleye, channel catfish, and largemouth bass.
Another reason
to go. Yes. The large remainder of the lake is open for all types of water sports. If you're interested in hanging out for a few days, the park does consist of 56 campsites. However, something that popped up quite a bit while I was reading these websites was a warning that, quote, there is currently no drinking water at the park. Restrooms and showers are fully functional, end quote. So folks, if you go there, pack a lot of your own drinking water. That's all I've got to say.
I just got to pipe in here and say that if you are going to be camping anywhere
pack your own
in the Rocky Mountain region, and I realize Arizona isn't part of that, but it is part of the Great Basin region. If you're anywhere in that part of the United States, you better be packing water because you can never rely on it.
Pack water everywhere.
Everywhere. So thank you for that, Angela.
You're so welcome.
So a week after the worthless piece of shit picked Lyman Lake, the sheriff had his dumbass in the back of a car and they were headed for Arizona. And once they arrived at the lake, and I just thought this part was great. So they arrived at the lake. Victor got out and pointed in the general direction that he had dumped Danice's body, and the sheriff loaded his worthless ass back up and shipped him back to jail where he belonged.
Good.
So they did not make it a pleasureful outing at all for this guy. And so the week before Memorial Day, likely the 18th through the 24th of that year, Sheriff Norton and a dive team were at Lyman Lake. And they worked with the Apache County Sheriff's Office, who coordinated local logistics and provided jurisdictional support in Arizona. And divers obviously used standard scuba gear, and visibility was as limited, as bad as only 1 foot at times.
Ooh.
And the team employed seismic search patterns guided by Braun's description of the barrel's location. And given the lake's size, which, I mean, you said it was 1,500 acres. This thing's huge.
Yeah.
And so given the lake size, they likely used GPS coordinates and landmarks that the Braun had provided to help narrow the search area. They used sonar equipment to map the lake bed and to identify anomalies. And in late May, Lyman's Lake's water temperature at the 6,000 foot elevation would have likely been about 50 to 60 degrees. So that's pretty freaking cold if you're in the water.
Water, yeah.
So it would have definitely required some thermal protection for the divers. And the lake bed consists of sediment, mud, and, possibly rocky outcrops with potential hazards like submerged vegetation. And I mean, who knows all the debris that's been tossed into that lake over the years, So the dive team located a barrel during their search, raising hopes of recovering Day's remains. The barrel was recovered and sent to the El Paso County Coroner's Office in Colorado Springs for analysis. However, Sheriff Norton reported that the coroner found, quote, nothing of value in this case in the barrel, indicating that it was unrelated to Day's disappearance. And I would say, nobody said this, but I think it's pretty clear that it didn't contain a body at all, because it would have been noted, well, we didn't find her, but we did find another body.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was the case. I think it was just a barrel that had been tossed in there for whatever reason. But this false lead was consistent with the earlier disappointments in this case, such as bone fragments that had been found in Monte Vista in 2006 and then again in 2008. And they got everybody's hopes up, but then it was discovered that they were not Danice's. And so the team wrapped up and headed home disappointed. And why did the dive fail? Well, Braun's description of the barrel's location was imprecise. He couldn't say, this is exactly where I dumped her. I couldn't, even if I was really trying to. I don't think I could go out in the middle of a 1,500 acre lake and say, yep, this is the exact spot.
I rode 17 times, turned.
Exactly. Yeah. And it had been over 7.5 years since he had disposed of her body on that night. And it was dark when they got there. So there's all kinds of reasons that his description was, and the guy didn't give a shit because he's a worthless bum.
Yeah.
And so he probably wasn't trying that hard either. So there's a lot of reasons, but they didn't find her. The dive team was down and convinced that the dive team, they said they were done. They were convinced that there was nothing in the lake. But Sheriff Norton, who, if you've watched Longmire, when I say that this guy reminds me of Longmire, if you've seen the show, then you know what I'm talking about, because Norton was not about to give up.
Mm-hmm.
So he got on the phone and he started calling all over the freaking place, trying to find another team that would dive on the lake. And in an interview that I watched, he said that he didn't care if he had to go dive himself. He was going to bring Danice home. And this is a pretty huge statement, because I have no reason to believe that Sheriff Norton had any clue how to scuba dive. The videos of him out there on the boat, he still has his cowboy hat on, He's out there on the boat in a t-shirt and his cowboy hat. He is just quintessential. I realize he's in Colorado, but he's just quintessential Wyoming, And I can also say that I believe he would have figured it out if that's what it took.
Right.
He would have went and rented scuba gear if he needed to take classes. He would have done whatever he had to do, because this guy was not about to break his promise to Rod, period. And he had come this far. There was no way he was giving up.
Yeah.
So in his calls, some of his colleagues recommended that he contact the Utah Department of Public Safety dive team, which he did. And they agreed, and they headed to the lake in Arizona. And let me say this, thank God for people like Sheriff Brian Norton, and for guys that the guys that are on the Utah Department of Public Safety dive team, because they didn't need to do this, and they deserve major kudos for stepping up and helping out.
Exactly.
They're in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
They have no ties to Colorado. Obviously, they have no ties to Arizona. There's no reason for them to go.
Just
but
friendly border neighbors.
Yep. As soon as he asked, they were like, oh, yeah, when do you want to meet? And they headed that direction. So this second dive and search took place on June 24th, 2009. And this dive contained many of the same agencies that I listed before, except for the stand-up people with the Utah Department of Public Safety dive team who led the dive operation, leveraging their expertise in underwater recovery. The Apache County Sheriff's Office again provided local support, including lake access and coordination with parks authorities. The Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office and Brian Norton, who directed the operation, with Norton emphasizing that it was a collaborative effort. And finally, the El Paso County Coroner's Office, who would receive any remains recovered and then provide forensic analysis post-recovery. So divers used advanced scuba equipment, including air tanks, regulators, and possibly rebreathers for extended bottom time in deeper sections. Night vision or high-powered underwater lights were likely employed, as visibility, like I said, was still limited to a foot or less due to sediment or algae. And I don't know, man, I am super interested in scuba diving, but that would freak me the hell out. Mm-hmm. If you're down in that dark ass place and you can't see in front of your face. I mean, as a firefighter, you experience that when you enter a structure fire. It is like the blackest black ever possible. Mm-hmm. I imagine at the bottom of this lake, it was very similar.
I've seen videos of sonar retrieval, and it is like your hands right in front of their face and you got nothing.
You can't see a thing. So the team used tactile search techniques, which is feeling around on the bottom of the lake.
Which also gives me the creeps. I just shuddered. Oh.
Because of the low visibility conditions, and then they would have supplemented that with metal detectors or magnometers to locate the welded shut oil barrel. High-resolution side-scan sonar or multi-beam echo sounders were deployed to create a detailed map of the lake bed, identifying the barrel's metallic signature against the muddy or rocky bottom. And GPS-enabled buoys and markers helped the divers return to precise locations after the sonar had detected anomalies. And the sonar did identify an anomaly which closely resembled a barrel. And in truth, when you looked at the sonar picture, it was a barrel. I mean, you could look at it. That sonar is freaking amazing to me how that works. And so cranes from the boat were used to hoist the heavy welded shut oil barrel from the lake bed to the surface, a delicate operation to preserve forensic evidence. Yeah. Boats with winches or davits supported the recovery, with divers guiding the barrel to avoid damaging its precious contents.
I'm willing to bet they didn't breathe till they landed.
Oh, you know that they didn't. And divers and support teams followed the chain of custody protocols, ensuring that the barrel was sealed and transported intact to prevent any contamination. The barrel was likely placed in a secure container for transport to the El Paso County Coroner's Office. And in late June, the lake's surface temperature would have been warmer than before, but it was still like 60 to 70 degrees. And then deeper waters are going to be cooler than that. So they still would have needed dry suits, I'm sure. And June in Apache County is typically pretty warm, 80 to 90 degrees in the day with clear skies, facilitating surface operations. The barrel was embedded in sediment and mud, requiring careful extraction to avoid stirring up silt, which would have just made visibility even worse and made recovery even more complicated. So on July 24th, 2009, the Utah Department of Public Safety dive team recovered that second barrel from Lyman Lake, and it did contain human remains. The barrel was described as a welded shut oil barrel, and it contained charred bone fragments, a femur, skeletal muscle, oil, and glass. indicating that the body had been burned before disposal.
Which sounds like a Molotov cocktail.
It really does. And, reading that, it was probably a burn barrel. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, when you live out in rural places,
through Wyoming just once, you'll
they're
learn.
pretty common. It's just an oil barrel that you go and you throw your trash into and then you burn it. That's just what you do. Yep. And so the remains were transported to the El Paso County Coroner's Office in Colorado Springs for DNA analysis. And on September 18th, 2009, DNA tests confirmed the remains belonged to Danice Day, providing closure to her family, finally. And forensic pathologist Leon Kelly testified that nearly 1,000 bone fragments and the femur showed, quote, the extent to which the perpetrator went to disfigure the body. Quote. So, though the cause of death remained undetermined, obviously due to the body's condition, the sheriff's determination in this case is the only reason that Danice's body was recovered. Even still, it is a pretty damn impressive find. And again, the Utah dive team deserves some major kudos. The lake's murky water likely limited the divers' ability to see freaking anything. So they couldn't, it's not like they could look down and see the barrel.
Yeah.
They would have had to swim down, and like you enjoy so much, sifted through the sand and the sediment at the bottom of the freaking lake in the dark. The welded shut oil barrel, potentially corroded after 7 years underwater, posed risks of structural failure during recovery, necessitating careful handling. The dive team faced the grim task of recovering a young mother's remains, adding psychological strain to the technical challenges. The operation required seamless collaboration among Colorado, Arizona, and Utah agencies, with logistical hurdles like transporting all the equipment down there and then transporting the remains back home across state lines.
Yeah.
I felt that it was important to include this section, and that is the kudos section. So kudos in this case are definitely owed to the following.
I don't get that section very often.
No.
So have at it, my friend.
Yep. So number one in the kudos section, once again, is Sheriff Brian Norton of Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office.
No. Sheriff Brian Longmire Norton.
Exactly. He pushed for answers and refused to give up until he had them. He oversaw the investigation, coordinated with Braun's attorney, and announced the recovery. Norton emphasized the importance of Braun's cooperation, stating, quote, without the cooperation of the suspect and his attorney, we probably would not have been able to locate Danice, end quote. Number two is David Mahoney, the Rio Grande County District Attorney.
We have no nickname for him.
No, we have no nicknames for the guys. Well, we have Longmire, I guess.
That's what I'm saying, is this guy I don't get to give a nickname to.
I'm trying to think. Did we meet I don't think we met the DA in Longmire. I can't think. Longmire's daughter, Katie, she was an attorney.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think we want to call David Katie, though.
No.
So anyway, David Mahoney is the district attorney. And this dude, like I said, he took over the investigation when the worthless asshat Desi Medina was obviously doing a horrible job and was protecting his friend and his friend's family. And it's regretful that he wasn't also charged, but I couldn't find any reasons why he wasn't, or if it was even chargeable. I don't know if being a worthless piece of shit is a chargeable offense or not, but it should be.
If it is, I have a list.
Yeah, me too. So David Mahoney, the DA, also pursued manslaughter charges against Braun, and he managed the plea deal, ensuring the burglary and the other charges were dropped. And, we don't like plea deals. I don't anyway. I guess I can't speak for all of us, but I don't think many true crime advocates and true crime enthusiasts like plea deals.
It's a case-by-case basis.
But in a case like this, it's absolutely necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And so this guy, he had a terrible job of negotiating this plea deal, and he kept going back. I mean, it took a long freaking time for them to get all of this worked out and to meet with the family and make sure they were good with it, try to come up with something that dipshit would agree to and that would make the family happy. So he really deserves a kudo for that.
Yeah.
And then another guy that I think deserves a kudo is David Jones, and that's Braun's attorney. And I'm not like a lot of people who just hate defense attorneys, because I firmly do believe in our rule of law in the United States. And I do believe that everybody is entitled to their defense. And so I don't agree with crooked ass attorneys, but
On either side.
But if it's a stand-up defense attorney, there's no marks against this guy for defending this piece of shit. And
doing his job.
He's doing his job, and he helped to facilitate the negotiations as well, relaying Braun's information about the barrel's location to secure the plea deal. And this guy had a damn tough job too.
Mm-hmm.
He probably didn't like this piece of shit any better than anybody else, you know? And so he had to go talk to him and try to work this deal out. So I think he gets kudos.
Yeah, just schmooze a snake is not a fun game.
Absolutely. And then the Utah Department of Public Safety dive team, they deserve major kudos. They executed the dive, leveraging specialized training in underwater search and recovery. Their expertise was critical in navigating the lake's challenging conditions. And again, they didn't have to do this.
Mm-mm.
They just did it because it was the right thing to do.
Right.
The Apache County Sheriff's Office in Arizona deserves kudos. They jumped on board. They provided local knowledge. They provided the lake access, logistical support, ensuring compliance with any Arizona regulations. They very likely provided watercraft as well for it. So the El Paso County Coroner's Office, and they conducted the DNA analysis and the forensic examination, with pathologist Leon Kelly providing expert testimony on the remains conditions. And then we've got worthless dipshit number 1, Victor Braun, and he gets absolutely no kudos. This lying piece of shit asshat worked himself a sweetheart deal, and only then did he give up the location of the body of his own daughter's mother.
Yeah.
I did read some places where he got a hat tip for finally saying where Danice was, but he doesn't for me. He would have went to his freaking grave with that information if he wouldn't have found a way that it would serve his selfish interests. So in my opinion, this asshat deserves to rot in hell, and I sincerely hope that he does. And then we have worthless dipshit number 2, and that's Vernon Braun, Victor's father, who also gets no kudos from me. I think it is extremely likely that he knew what Victor did and that he helped him cover it up. And son or not, there is no excuse for that. And in this case, I think that it is definitely a case of like father, like son.
Yeah. He was probably even slightly proud of him.
He probably was.
Hey, yeah, you're joining the family business.
Yep. And then we've got worthless dipshit number 3, and that's Sheriff Desi Medina, who mishandled this case to a great degree. He was compromised to the extent that the DA had to step in and take over the case, which you almost never hear of.
I think I actually heard your eyes roll when you said
you very well might have, because it's a tough thing to apply that title to this freaking asshat. The fact that he essentially announced in a commissioner's meeting that Victor had punched Danice in the throat and killed her was beyond irresponsible. not only does it raise the question as to why in the hell he didn't have Victor in handcuffs if he had that information.
Yeah,
but
no doubt.
It also could have compromised the investigation. You know, I mean, Victor worked himself a plea deal, and so he didn't go to trial. But if he would have gone to trial, a defense attorney would have a heyday with the sheriff announcing something like that at a commissioner's meeting.
That would be the best part.
Oh my gosh. And so I am glad that this asshat isn't still sheriff, and hopefully he is nowhere near law enforcement. Hopefully he's doing something that requires no more responsibility than pumping out a porta potty. The discovery of Danice's remains in June 2009 marked a turning point in more than a 7-year investigation into her disappearance from Monte Vista, Colorado on June 9th, 2002. On November 3rd, 2009, Braun pleaded guilty to reckless manslaughter in Rio Grande County District Court, admitting to causing Day's death. He also pleaded guilty to 2 2007 theft charges, including the auto parts store burglary, which I talked about. And as part of his plea deal, 9 other charges, which were 4 burglaries, the drug charges, and motor vehicle theft, were all dropped. Braun still claimed that Day had died of a drug overdose on January 9th, 2002, and panicking due to his probation status, he burned her body, welded it into a barrel, and dumped it in Lyman Lake, 400 miles from Monte Vista.
Quick question.
Yep.
Earlier you said June 9th, and then you said January 9th.
Not for her murder. Her murder was in January.
Okay.
Her body was found in June.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next, but you still have them in 2002. Okay. I'm on board.
You with us?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe I screwed up.
No, you didn't. I veered from the track, and I'm back now.
Okay. So, but it's good to bring that up, because if you're confused, then the listeners might be as well. So,
okay,
as long as we make that clear. So, this narrative was disputed by Day's family, obviously, and they cited domestic violence as her intent to leave Braun. And I think that's exactly what happened. I think that she went and said, "I'm leaving your sorry ass," and he killed her.
Yep.
District court.
Can't have you. No one can.
Exactly. Yep. So District Court Judge Martin Gonzalez was having none of Braun's bullshit excuses. He sentenced Braun to the maximum for manslaughter, 12 years in prison, $1,000 fine, 2 years mandatory parole, and over $7,000 in restitution for the 2 theft charges. Gonzalez cited Braun's extensive criminal history, including the 2007 burglaries, and his 2,851 days of anguish endured by Day's family, stating, quote, "It's 2,851 days her children did not have her," end quote. The judge noted that the plea deal was self-serving for Braun, as it cleared much of his criminal record, but it had provided closure for his family. Dr. Kelly's testimony about the remains underscored the brutality of the disposal, and I probably made a mistake, because I should have included this judge on the list of kudos, because this guy's hands were tied. I definitely got the impression that he would have sentenced this piece of shit to life if he could have. But the deal was 6 to 12 years, and man, he maxed that out. So Braun didn't want to do more than 6, but he didn't get his wish. So in 2011, daddy dipshit dumbass Vernon Braun was charged with 6 counts of perjury for allegedly lying about his knowledge of Day's body disposal. Vernon pleaded not guilty, but then he died in March of 2012 at the age of 71 before he could stand trial, and that left the perjury case unresolved. I'm glad this asshat is dead, because I think that he is as guilty as his worthless ass son. I don't think that he was involved in her murder, but I think he was with Victor And they together went to Arizona to dispose of her body, and anybody that could be involved in disposing of a body is no better than the murderer themselves, in my mind.
And what about the girlfriend, Dad's girlfriend that was talking about, oh, he did it, and now we have to go do all this? Like, where is she? Shouldn't she?
So we'll talk about her when we get to our theories section, but she does kind of deserve a kudo because she actually said, I mean, she didn't lie for him.
Yeah.
You know, and so, but we haven't forgotten that part. We will revisit her.
You knew I had to foreshadow somewhere.
Oh, I was expecting it. Anytime. So I wish that his death would have come while he was behind bars for his role in all of this. No additional charges were filed against others, though Sheriff Norton indicated an ongoing investigations into persons who may have assisted Braun, but I don't think that ever really went anywhere.
Okay. Well, Danice Day's family, devastated by her disappearance and the gruesome discovery, expressed a mix of relief, anger, and renewed grief. Key family members include Rod Day, her father. So Rod, a Monte Vista resident, spoke at the September 22nd press conference and December 2009 sentencing, expressing anger and bittersweet closure. Quote, I have been waiting for 7.5 years to find out where my daughter was. Now I know where she is. Am I angry? You bet I'm angry. End quote.
I don't blame him.
I tried to be angry there, but I didn't want to not do him justice.
Right. Yep.
So he highlighted the mutilation and dumping of Danice's remains as particularly painful. I couldn't even read it.
I know. It's a tough one, man.
Stating he struggled to move past her fate. Rod was one of 5 family members to give statements at Braun's sentencing. Jonine Day, the mother, living in Laramie, Wyoming, provided a DNA sample in July 2009 to confirm the remains. She described Danice as both, quote, beautiful inside and out, loving and quick to forgive, noting the renewed grief. It's really hard because we have to start over and really grieve.
And that's the hard part in cases like this is you come to the realization that your loved one is probably dead. So you go through a grieving process to even reach that point. Mm-hmm. But then 7.5 years later, the remains are found. Then you have to do the funeral and you got to go through it all over again.
Yeah. Oh, and all over again with the trial.
Absolutely.
So,
and you know, with a lot of these families, then the piece of shit is found guilty and sentenced to life or something, and then they got to relive it every couple years, every time they come up for appeals or when they start becoming eligible for parole.
Oh, it's just disgusting.
It is.
She maintained contact with investigators and supported memorial efforts reflecting her commitment to Danice's memory. My heart really goes out to the entire family, but it really does suck that nearly as soon as Jonine and Danice got clean and sober, Danice was gone. The two never really had the chance to know each other when they were both healthy, except for that one Christmas. I'm pretty sure that Jonine has maintained her sobriety, and if there's anything good that could come of Danice's death, I hope that's one of them. Hopefully gives Jonine the will and strength to maintain this sobriety.
Right.
Jackie Flint, her sister, is living in New York City, described the discovery as, quote, like losing her a second time, end quote, emphasizing the fresh wounds despite 7 years of preparation. She believed those remains were Danice's and therefore returned to Laramie in July of 2009 for the first time due to the confidence in the lead. Jackie maintained the Danice Day website, www.daniceday.com, now defunct, and a Facebook page remembering Danice Lee Day to preserve her sister's memory and chronicles in the case. She planned to keep these active post-resolution. Are they still active? Facebook page?
I think the Facebook page is still active, but the website is not.
Okay. So this leads us to Julie Flint, her sister, based in Laramie, portrayed Danice as a huge optimist who cared about others' feelings and avoided burdening people. She noted signs of an unhealthy relationship with Braun, including his possessiveness, and confirmed Danice's plan to leave him. Julie attended Braun's court hearings, calling it, quote, the hardest thing I ever had to do, end quote, and supported memorial efforts. The stepmother, Judy Day, is Rod's second wife, lived in Del Norte, am I pronouncing that right?
Yep.
Colorado, and supported the family during the investigation and memorials, though she was less prominent in public statements. The family's grief was compounded by false leads, a terrible sheriff. Apparently I'm saying that so I don't say words that John would like to say. And the case's duration. They valued the closure but struggled with Braun's lenient charge and loss of Danice's potential. Funeral and memorials details. A memorial for Danice was held on November 6, 2009 at the United Methodist Church in Monte Vista, Colorado, allowing the community to honor her. A second memorial took place on November 13, 2009 at the Alice Hardy Stevens Center in Laramie, Wyoming, near Jonine's home, for family and friends in her birthplace. These services were planned after DNA confirmation in September 2009, as the family had been unable to grieve fully without a body. Jackie noted the importance of honoring Danice's memory, stating, quote, I want to put something together to make sure she's honored somehow, end quote. I think Sheriff Norton said they recovered right around 5 pounds total of remains. Because of this, memorials suggest a symbolic and partial return, given the remains' fragmented state. The El Paso County coroner may have also retained some evidence for legal purposes. The memorials focus on Danice's role as a loving mother, daughter, and sister, with family members sharing memories of her optimism and strength.
So, I don't know if you saw very many pictures of her or not.
I didn't know of this case, at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising how little there is about it, but, she was a really pretty little blonde girl, and she wasn't very big,
Beautiful little kids, I did see that.
But she maybe weighed 90 to 100 pounds.
Soaking wet?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But even still, they only recovered 5 pounds.
Yeah.
When the sheriff said it, he knew exactly. He's like, we recovered 5 pounds and, I don't know, 8 ounces or whatever he said. I mean, he knew the number exactly, but a very tiny portion.
Yeah.
Where they were able to recover. It's just so tragic.
According to the little kid in Jerry Maguire, I'm trying to lighten the mood a little bit. Doesn't the human brain weigh 8 pounds?
Exactly. Yep.
So let's put that in perspective. Exactly.
So, I mean, you're really talking about enough remains to fit in a coffee can, and that's it.
Oh, man. Okay. In Monte Vista, a small farming town, the memorials drew significant attendance, reflecting Danice's impact as a local server at Dos Rios restaurant. In Laramie, her Wyoming roots connected her to a broader community. Danice Day was a mother of 2 young children at the time of her disappearance. Joshua, her son, born circa 1998. Joshua was 3 years old when Danice vanished. Ouch.
Yeah.
He was from a previous relationship, not with Braun, and by 2009 was being raised by his biological father in Missouri. Little is known about Joshua's life post-2009 as the family prioritized privacy. He would be approximately 27 years old now in 2025. Please don't go looking for him or her daughter Kaylee, because it's just not right.
That's why I included as little information as possible about him.
Born in 2001, Kaylee was 6 months old at the time of Danice's disappearance and was Braun's biological daughter. By 2009, she was being raised by Braun's father.
Yeah.
That's hard to swallow.
Yes, it is.
In Monte Vista, Vernon's death in 2012 at age 71 likely shifted Kaylee's care to another family member or guardian, though no sources confirm this. Kaylee would be around 24 years old in 2025. Both children were too young to remember Danice vividly, but her absence profoundly affected their upbringing. The family emphasized that Danice would never have abandoned her children, countering Braun's claim that she left with a friend. The memorials and ongoing family efforts, such as the website, aimed to preserve Danice's memory for Joshua and Kaylee, ensuring they knew her love and character.
And, when I wrote that they were too young to remember her vividly. And I only said that because Joshua was 3. And sometimes there's like memories that can go back that far, just very fleeting memories. But Kaylee would have absolutely no memory of her mother. And most likely, neither would Joshua. Neither one of them would probably have any memory of her.
Which is a double-edged sword, because in a way you can create them a new life and spare them the hurt, but you don't want to.
Exactly.
Because Danice is important.
Yep. Yeah, it's like you said, it's bittersweet. I mean, I'm sure that they would give anything to have memories of their mother.
Definitely.
But I don't know. It's just tough. Obviously any murder is tough. Yeah. But anytime little kids are involved in losing a parent, it's tougher. Hopefully
they have less memories of how sad and tragic those 7.5 years were.
Yes, exactly. And hopefully, and who knows if Vern was taking care of Kaylee, who knows what she would have known,
Yeah.
But hopefully Joshua was taken away from there and wasn't, subject to all of that.
Yeah.
But as we said, Braun was sentenced on December 10th, 2009 to 12 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections for reckless manslaughter with 2 years mandatory parole, $1,000 fine, plus $7,000 in restitution for his 2007 thefts. His DOC number was 148438. And he was described as a white male born 1976, 6 feet tall, 175 pounds, with blonde hair and green eyes. Braun's estimated parole eligibility date was September 22nd, 2013, with a parole hearing scheduled for March of 2015. His estimated mandatory release date was July 2nd, 2019. And his sentence discharge date was not specified, but that would have likely been shortly thereafter. So by 2015, Braun was assigned to community corrections, indicating a transition from prison to some sort of a halfway house or supervised release, suggesting that he was paroled or nearing parole release at that point. Given his 12-year sentence, which started December of 2009, plus 2 years of parole, Braun likely completed his sentence by December of 2023. And at the latest, I would say, because that's 12 years in prison plus 2 years of parole, accounting for maybe possibly good behavior credits. And Colorado's parole system allows for early release for nonviolent offenders. And unfortunately, manslaughter, while serious, might qualify for such a consideration. So I don't know for sure when he got out, but at the very latest, it would have been December of 2023.
I'm back to pissed. Why does manslaughter qualify for non-violent?
Well, I mean, in this particular case, it's insane. I could understand it maybe if it was like a car accident or something like that.
That's involuntary manslaughter.
This is true. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have a good answer.
Well, I don't. Damn it, John, you're my answer guy.
I don't have a good answer because I don't think there's a good reason.
It's true, but
so,
moving on.
As of May 2025, no definitive public record confirms this piece of shit's exact location. Since his sentence likely ended by 2023, as I said, I presume that he's out of prison and off parole and living as a private citizen. A 2022 source notes that Braun, quote, has been released from prison, end quote, and was in community corrections by 2015, like I said, and that supports the timeline of his release by 2019 to 2023. Braun's last known residence was Monte Vista, Colorado, and his family, like his piece of shit dad, who died in 2012, was based there. So he may have returned to Monte Vista for that town. I hope not. Or other nearby areas like Del Norte. But there's no recent arrests or public activities that are documented. And so we don't know.
So he's maybe keeping a
Low profile, hopefully. If you are somewhere near this asshat, please keep your distance. In my opinion, he is a worthless, cold-blooded murderer and has personality flaws that just are not fixable.
Narcissist.
Yes. I hope that he dies single and soon and never has the chance to hurt someone else like we know he did Danice. And unfortunately, unlike the Brian Barrett case with Thomas Montgomery, where I said that I don't think he would likely reoffend, I think this piece of shit will very likely reoffend.
Oh, yeah.
If he's in a relationship, it's probably violent and abusive.
And she's probably trying to figure out how to get out of a barrel right now.
Exactly.
In my opinion.
Yep. Angela, do you know what time it is?
Time for me to get a watch?
Probably so, yes.
Okay. Second guess, is it theory time?
It is theory time.
Nice.
I know that you've been patiently waiting for this.
I have. I always am.
So these theories address Danice's death, body disposal, and the roles of Victor Braun, Vernon Braun, and Sheriff Desi Medina.
Eyes rolled again.
Each is analyzed with the confirmed recusal of Medina, the DA takeover of the case, the girlfriend's claim, which you alluded to before, the townspeople's claims, and prior evidence. And so when analyzing these, I make a sincere attempt to remain unbiased and to give every theory a fair and unbiased analysis. So I really approach these mathematically. I try to keep my own opinions completely out of it, and I apply a certain integer to each particular component, and it's just math that I use to come up with these. So
I was told there would be no math.
You don't have to do the math.
Good.
I have to do the math.
But what commercial is that from?
I don't know what commercial that's from.
Oh, now I can't remember. But
I haven't watched commercials in years.
Well, I know. It's been many years since a commercial. I was told there'd be no math. Why can't I know that? Anyway, that's not important. Continue.
You're gonna think of it here in a couple.
I am, and it's just gonna be a blurt out in all your theories. Yeah,
that's okay. Bring it.
That's the theme tonight. Bring it.
It is. So these are just my opinions. Obviously, they hold no weight beyond that and encourage further discussion.
So, Dark Dialogue is brought to you by the letter D and the phrase "bring it."
Right.
Got it.
100%.
Let's go.
So theory number one is that Victor piece of shit Braun intentionally killed Danice Day. It was murder. Vernon Braun, his worthless father, helped him dispose of the body. Medina was uninvolved after he recused himself. So that's theory number one. So describing that, Braun murdered Danice on July 9th, 2002, likely over her plan to leave with their daughter Kaylee during an argument. Vernon assisted in disposing of his body, burning, welding, dumping in Lyman Lake. Medina recused himself due to his friendship and business ties with Vernon, and after the DA's takeover, he was uninvolved, with no deliberate kind of cover-up. So the evidence for this theory is Victor Braun's manslaughter plea in 2009, the domestic violence history, and Day's intent to leave because she had mentioned it to several friends, actually, and coworkers.
Yeah.
And that supports murder. The condition of the remains and the disposal's complexity being welded into a barrel driven 400 miles away and dumped into a lake suggest an intent to conceal a serious crime. The girlfriends claim that Vernon admitted that Victor killed Danice and that they disposed of evidence corroborated by his perjury charges for lying about being out of state strongly implicate good old Vern. And his Monte Vista proximity and his role in raising Kaylee provides all kinds of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, Medina's recusal shows that he stepped back due to his friendship and alleged business ties with Vernon. His February 2002 statement that Braun had struck Day, he did retract that and say that it was only speculation, but that prompted the DA's initial takeover. The DA's full control later indicates Medina's influence had ended. The investigation stall reflects missing persons challenges, no body, there's a small police force, not necessarily that Medina had ongoing interference. So my analysis, the strengths of this are: number 1, the girlfriend's claim and Vernon's perjury make his disposal role nearly certain. Braun's motive and disposal evidence strongly support murder. Medina's recusal and the DA's takeover explain his limited role, negating complicity post-recusal. The townspeople's claims of friendship and bruises, the ties are bolstered by that recusal. The weaknesses of it, the undermined cause of death prevents definitive murder proof. Vernon's exact role is unconfirmed due to his death in 2012. The recusal's timing of post-February 2002 means that Medina influenced a lot of the early stages of the investigation, potentially affecting leads, and the DA's failure to charge Braun until 2009 suggests there was systemic issues beyond Medina. The counter-arguments for this is that if Medina recused, why initial involvement and a public statement? So if he recused himself, then why was he obviously involved in the investigation?
Yeah.
And why would he make that statement? His comments may have forced recusal due to bias concerns. Vernon's perjury could reflect protection, but the girlfriend's claim suggests active involvement. Braun's overdose claim fits manslaughter, but it's way less credible. So I calculated the likelihood of this theory to be 50%. This is the most likely theory due to Vernon's near certain role and Braun's murder motive, but Medina's confirmed recusal slightly lowers it by clarifying his withdrawal, and the DA's takeover shifts some of that responsibility. The townspeople's claims and recusal strengthen Vernon's role, but don't fully resolve earlier investigative gaps. So theory number 2 then is that Victor Braun accidentally killed Danice Day, or it was an overdose, or it was just a negligent accident. Vernon Braun helped dispose of the body. Medina was uninvolved after the recusal. So the description of this is: Day died of an overdose or some act of neglect, as Braun had claimed. Vernon helped dispose of the body to protect Victor from probation violation, and Medina recused himself, and then after the DA's takeover, he was completely uninvolved. So the evidence for this theory is Braun's manslaughter plea and overdose claim align with an accidental death. Day's teenage drug history makes overdose possible, though her family heavily disputed that she had relapsed. The girlfriend's claim that Vernon said Victor had, quote, killed Danice could include negligence, with Vernon's disposal role confirmed by his admission and perjury charges. The out-of-state alibi lie strengthens this. Number 3, Medina's recusal and the DA's takeover, confirmed by the show Disappeared. Norton and the DA show that he stepped back due to his ties to Vernon. His retracted statement doesn't imply complicity post-recusal, and the investigation stall reflects limited resources. So my analysis of this is The strengths are the manslaughter plea and the girlfriend's claims support Vernon's role. Medina's recusal and DA takeover negate his influence after 2002. Overdose is plausible given Braun's claim. The weaknesses for this argument are the disposal's complexity seems excessive for an accident, strongly suggests murder. The girlfriend's use of the word killed and domestic violence history strongly lean toward intentionality, and the recusal's timing suggests Medina's early actions, like the statement that he gave, may have skewed the focus. The counterargument to this would be, if accidental, why such concealment? Why do you weld her into a barrel and drive her 400 miles away?
Exactly.
Family testimony points to murder. Medina's recusal counters negligence post-recusal, and I calculated the likelihood of this one at 20%. Vernon's role is strong, but overdose is way less likely than murder due to the disposal intent and the family accounts. Medina's recusal clarifies his non-involvement, making this a solid secondary theory. And then theory number 3 is that Victor Braun accidentally killed Danice Day. Again, overdose or negligence. He acted completely alone, and Medina was uninvolved after recusal. So this theory is that Braun accidentally caused Day's death by overdose or by negligence, and he disposed of her body completely alone, fearing the probation violation and his daughter being taken away. Good old Vern was not involved, and the girlfriend's claim is false or it was misinterpreted. Medina recused himself and was uninvolved after the DA's takeover. So the evidence for this is Braun's manslaughter plea and the overdose claims support an accidental death again. His confession, he claims sole responsibility. Number 2 is Day's drug history and making overdose plausible, though again, her family disputes that. The girlfriend's claim and Vernon's perjury strongly contradict Braun acting alone, suggesting Vernon's involvement. The girlfriend's report led to charges indicating the credibility of it. Number 4, there's no evidence that confirms Vernon's role, but the girlfriend's claim and perjury outweigh Braun's solo narrative. Medina's recusal and the DA takeover confirm that he did step back due to his ties with Vernon. His retracted statement shows no complicity post-recusal. My analysis of this one is, number 1, the strengths. Braun's plea and overdose claim make accidental death possible, and his confession supports that he acted alone. Medina's recusal and the DA takeover align with non-involvement, reducing his influence. The weaknesses of this argument are the girlfriend's claim, which is huge, and that's corroborated by Vernon's perjury charges, making it a highly credible source, and it conflicts with the emphasis on Vernon's role. Disposal logistics, he had to weld her into a barrel. He had to load the barrel into a vehicle. He had to drive the barrel 400 miles. All of that really suggests that he had assistance.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the girlfriend...
Unload the barrel.
Exactly. And get it... I'm sure it would have had to have been taken in onto a boat, got out to the middle of the lake, tossed overboard. I mean, that's a lot for one person to do. And, lifting a dead body, especially one that's in a barrel, just looking, I have absolutely no clue, but just looking at it, it almost looks like it was 2 barrels that had been welded together, So we're talking about, it's pretty freaking heavy.
But even lifting a barrel by yourself is awkward, even if it's empty.
It is.
So.
Yep. The girlfriend's use again of the word killed really challenges an accidental narrative. The counter argument for this is that if Braun acted alone, why was Vern charged with perjury? And why did his girlfriend make that claim? Her statement's legal impact undermines its falsity. The recusal doesn't affect Vernon's role. So I calculated the likelihood of this one at 5%. This theory is plausible due to Braun's plea, but the girlfriend's claim and Vernon's perjury significantly reduces its likelihood. Medina's recusal supports his non-involvement, but Vernon's role overshadows Braun acting alone. And then the fourth theory is that Victor Braun killed Danice Day intentionally or accidentally. Vernon helped. Medina mishandled or covered it up due to his friendship and relationship with Vern. So that description is that Vern killed Day, either by murder or an accident. Vern then assisted in the disposal, and Medina, due to his friendship and business ties with Vern, mishandled the investigation. Or he covered up Victor's involvement before recusing himself. The DA's takeover limited Medina's later influence. So the evidence for this is the girlfriend's claim again of Vernon's perjury confirmed Vernon's disposal role. Braun's plea and domestic violence history support killing and most likely cold-blooded murder. Medina's recusal, confirmed again by disappeared by Norton and the DA, and the townspeople's claims of his Vernon ties provide a motive for his bias. His February 2002 statement, which prompted recusal and the DA takeover of the case, suggests mishandling by prejudicing Braun without evidence. The investigation's 7-year stall could reflect Medina's early bias and or negligence. Number 3, no evidence. There's no financial records that proves any kind of a deliberate cover-up. The DA's takeover and Norton's 2009 resolution with Braun's plea deal suggest Medina's influence had waned, at least. My analysis of this one is Vernon's role is certain. Medina's recusal, prompted by his statement and his ties to Vern, supports early mishandling. The DA's takeover indicates concerns about Medina's impartiality. The weaknesses of this argument is there's no evidence that proves a cover-up happened. The recusal suggests that Medina mitigated bias, and the DA's failure to charge Braun until 2009 reflects the case's complexity, not Medina's sole fault. The investigation stall aligns with the resource limits. The counter argument for this is that if Medina covered it up, why implicate Braun publicly? Recusal and the DA takeover counter a deliberate complicity. Mishandling due to bias or inexperience is more likely. So this theory, I gave a likelihood of 20%. The confirmed recusal and townspeople's claims significantly boost this theory, as Medina's early actions of the stupid statement, the stalled leads, suggest mishandling tied to Vern's influence. Vern's role is confirmed, but cover-up lacks proof, making this a strong contender. And then theory number 5 is that Victor Braun intentionally killed Danice Day in an act of murder. He acted alone, and Medina was uninvolved. And so Braun murdered Day alone, disposing of her body without Vern's help. The girlfriend's claim is false, and Vern's perjury reflects protection. Medina recused himself and was uninvolved after the DA takeover. So the evidence for this is the plea deal, the domestic violence history, and the disposal details all support murder. His confession claims sole responsibility. The girlfriend's claim and Vern's perjury strongly implicate Vern, contradicting the fact that Braun acted alone. Medina's recusal and DA takeover confirmed that he did step back. He retracted his statements, and that shows no complicity after the recusal. So the strengths for this are that Braun's motive and confession support murder. Medina's recusal and the DA takeover align with a non-involvement. The weaknesses are, again, the girlfriend's claim and the perjury charges make Vern's involvement likely. Disposal logistics also suggest assistance, And the counter argument would be that if Vern wasn't involved, why the girlfriend made those claims and why was he charged with perjury? And the recusal negates Medina's influence. And I calculated the likelihood of that at 5%. Vernon's role per the girlfriend's claim seriously reduces the likelihood of this theory. And despite Braun's confession, Medina's recusal supports non-involvement. And then theory number 6 is that a third party killed Danice Day. Braun and Vern covered it up and Medina was uninvolved or negligent after the recusal. So the description of this theory is that a third party killed Day and Braun, with Vernon's help, disposed of the body. Medina recused himself. He remained uninvolved or negligent after the DA takeover. So the evidence for this is Braun's unverified claim of Day going with a friend. His plea deal takes responsibility, and the girlfriend's claim ties Victor to the killing, though. Vernon's perjury and the girlfriend's claim confirm his disposal role, not a third-party killer. Medina's recusal and DA takeover suggest minimal involvement. My analysis of this, the strengths, Vernon's role is confirmed, in my opinion. Medina's recusal supports that he likely had minimal involvement. The weaknesses, there's no third-party evidence. The girlfriend's claim implicates Victor. The counter-arguments would be, why would Braun plead guilty if a third party was involved? And Vernon's role aligns with Braun's guilt. And then the second counter-argument would be, how did Braun know where the body was? So I calculated the likelihood of this one at 0. There's no third-party evidence. Braun knowing where the body was and the girlfriend's claim makes this completely negligible. I did see it out there, which is why I included it. It is a theory, but there's no freaking way that it's true. None. And so the percent likelihood summary is theory number 1, Braun murdered Day, Vernon helped, Medina was uninvolved after the recusal. That was 50%. That's most likely. The girlfriend's claim, Vernon's perjury, and Braun's motive are strong, but Medina's recusal and DA takeover slightly lower it by clarifying his withdrawal. And I got to say, if these percentages don't prove that I approach this non-biasedly, I don't know what would, because I want this piece of shit, worthless sheriff to be guilty so freaking bad because I hate this guy, but I just don't think there's enough evidence to support that. So theory number 2, Braun accidentally killed Day, Vernon helped, Medina was uninvolved. I gave that 20%. Vernon's role is certain, but overdose is less likely than murder, and Medina's recusal supports that non-involvement. Theory number 3, again, was 5%, and that was that Braun accidentally killed Day. He acted alone. Medina was uninvolved. Theory number 4, I gave 20%, and that was that Braun killed Day, Vern helped, and that Medina mishandled or covered it up. Theory number 5 is that Braun murdered Day, he acted alone, Medina was uninvolved, and I gave that 5%. And then theory number 6 again is that a third party killed her and Braun and Vern covered it up, and that again was 0%. In the quiet, close-knit town of Monte Vista, Colorado, Danice Lee Day was a beacon of warmth, a young woman whose radiant smile and boundless optimism touched everyone she met. Born on August 6, 1977 in Laramie, Wyoming, Danice was a daughter, a sister, a mother, and a friend whose life was tragically cut short on January 9, 2002. At the age of 24. Her murder, revealed through the gruesome discovery of her remains in Lyman Lake, Arizona in June 2009, was not just a loss for her family, but a wound felt across her community, her state, and the entire world. Danice's story is one of love, resilience, and unfulfilled dreams, and her absence reminds us how crimes like hers rob humanity of its brightest lights, leaving a void that echoes through generations. Danice was more than a victim. She was a vibrant soul who lived with purpose and heart, described by her mother, Janine Day, as, quote, beautiful inside and out. Danice had a gift for seeing the good in others, for forgiving quickly, and for spreading joy with her infectious optimism. Her sister, Julie Flint, called her a huge optimist, someone who cared deeply about others' feelings and never wanted to burden those around her. As a server at Dos Rios restaurant in Monte Vista, Danice's warmth made her a beloved figure, her laughter a familiar sound in the small farming town where everyone knew her name. Above all, Danice was a devoted mother to her 2 young children, Joshua, age 3, and Kaylee, just 6 months old at the time of her disappearance. Her love for them was fierce and unwavering, a guiding force in her life. Despite personal struggles, including a toxic relationship with Victor Braun, Danice was determined to build a better future for her children. She planned to leave Braun, to reclaim her independence, and to give Joshua and Kaylee the life that they deserved. That dream was stolen from her and from them in a single, brutal act of violence. On January 9, 2002, Danice vanished from Monte Vista, leaving behind a community in shock and a family in anguish. For 7.5 years, her father, Rod Day, mother, Jonine, sisters, Jackie and Julie Flint, and stepmother, Judy, searched tirelessly for answers. They endured false leads, bone fragments in 2006 and 2008 that weren't hers, and the torment of not knowing where she was. Rod's words in the 2009 press conference capture the depth of their pain, saying, quote, "I have been waiting for 7.5 years to find out where my daughter was. Now I know where she is. Am I angry? You bet I'm angry." The discovery of Danice's remains on June 24, 2009, in a welded-shut oil barrel submerged in Lyman Lake brought bittersweet closure. The nearly 1,000 charred bone fragments, a femur, skeletal muscle, oil, and glass revealed the horrific lengths to which Victor Braun went to conceal his crime. Braun's guilty plea to reckless manslaughter in November 2009, claiming Danice died of a drug overdose, was a hollow explanation for her family, who knew her as a survivor of Braun's abuse and a mother who would never abandon her children. The truth, supported by evidence of domestic violence and Braun's elaborate disposal, points to murder, a deliberate act that ended Danice's life and shattered her family's world. The impact on Danice's family was profound and enduring. Janine spoke of having to, quote, start over and really grieve, a process made raw by the confirmation of her daughter's fate. Jackie, who maintained the Danice Day website and the Remembering Danice Lee Day Facebook page, described the discovery as like losing her a second time, a fresh wound after years of hope. Julie, who saw Danice's strength and optimism, faced the agony of attending Braun's court proceedings, calling it, quote, the hardest thing I ever had to do. Rod's anger and Judy's quiet support reflected a family united in grief, forever changed by the loss of their vibrant Danice. Perhaps the most heartbreaking consequence of Danice's murder is the loss her children, Joshua and Kaylee, have endured. At 3 years old, Joshua was old enough to feel his mother's absence, but too young to fully understand it. Raised by his biological father in Missouri, he grew up without Danice's nurturing presence, her laughter, or her unwavering love. Kaylee, just 6 months old when Danice was taken, was Braun's daughter and raised by Vernon Braun in Monte Vista until his death in 2012. Now in their 20s, Joshua approximately 27 and Kaylee 24, they have lived their lives without their mother, who adored them, a void that no one can fill. Danice's family has worked tirelessly to preserve her memory for her children. The memorials held on November 6, 2009 at the United Methodist Church in Monte Vista and the December 13, 2009 at the Alice Hardy Stevens Center in Laramie, Wyoming were not just for the community, but for Joshua and Kaylee, ensuring that they know their mother's love and legacy. Jackie's online efforts, sharing photos and stories of Danice's kindness, are a testament to this commitment. Yet, no tribute can replace the years stolen from them. The bedtime stories, the school milestones, the moments only a mother can provide. Danice's murder deprived Joshua and Kaylee of their greatest advocate, leaving them to navigate life with an irreplaceable absence. In Monte Vista, a town of fewer than 5,000 people, Danice's disappearance and murder were a seismic blow. The community rallied around her family, joining searches, offering prayers, and holding on to hope for 7 years. When her remains were identified in September 2009, the town grieved as one, their collective heart broken by the loss of a young woman who was everyone's daughter, sister, or friend. The November 2009 memorial at the United Methodist Church drew a crowd that filled the pews, a testament to Danice's impact. As Sheriff Brian Norton noted, the case's resolution was a community effort, with locals never giving up on finding Danice. Colorado, too, felt the reverberations of Danice's tragedy. Her case, featured on Investigation Discovery's Disappeared, Daddy's Girl episode, brought attention to the challenges of missing persons investigations in rural areas, where small-town sheriff's offices like the Rio Grande County's 10 officers in 2002 struggle with limited resources. The involvement of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and the Utah Department of Public Safety dive team in 2009 underscored the state's commitment to justice, but also the heartbreak of cases left unresolved for years. Danice's story became a rallying cry for better support for victims' families and improved investigative tools, a legacy that continues to shape Colorado's approach to such crimes. The murder of Danice Day is not just a local tragedy. It is a loss for the world. Her death at the hands of someone that she trusted is a stark reminder of the pervasive threat of domestic violence, which claims countless lives globally every year. The World Health Organization estimates that 1 in 3 women worldwide experiences intimate partner violence, and Danice's story, her plan to leave Braun, her courage in the face of abuse, mirrors the struggles of millions. Her murder deprives us of a woman who could have inspired others, who might have raised her children to become leaders, who could have continued to spread joy in her community and beyond. Cases like Danice's rob humanity of its potential. Her optimism, her capacity for forgiveness, and her love for her children were gifts that could have touched countless lives. Instead, her murder left a legacy of pain, a family fractured, and a community forever altered. The 2,851 days her family waited for answers, as Judge Martin Gonzalez noted at Braun's sentencing, were days the world lost Danice's light. Her children, growing up without her, represent a generation deprived of her guidance, a ripple effect that extends far beyond Monte Vista. Moreover, crimes like this erode our collective sense of safety and justice. The fact that Vernon Braun, Victor's father, was charged with perjury for lying about his knowledge of the disposal, and that Sheriff Desi Medina's friendship with Vernon led to his recusal, raises questions about trust in institutions. Medina's premature statement in February 2002, speculating on Braun's guilt, and the subsequent stall in the investigations until 2009 highlight how personal biases and systemic limitations can delay justice, leaving families like Danice's in limbo. These failures deprive all of us of the assurances that truth will prevail, that those who harm will be held accountable swiftly. Danice's murder and the thousands like it each year strip away more than individual lives. They diminish our shared humanity. They deprive us of love and connection. Danice's capacity to love her children, her family, her community was a gift to the world. Her death severed those bonds, leaving a void where her warmth once shone. Potential and dreams. At 24, Danice was on the cusp of a new chapter, ready to break free from abuse and build a life for her children. Her murder stole her future, and with it, the contributions that she may have made, perhaps as a mentor, an advocate, or simply a loving mother. Trust and safety. The betrayal of Danice's trust by Braun, compounded by the investigative delays, undermines our belief in safety within relationships and communities. When justice falters, as it did for 7 years, we all feel less secure. Justice and healing. The lenient manslaughter charge against Braun, despite evidence of premeditation in the disposal and Vernon's unprosecuted perjury, left Danice's family with partial justice. This deprives us of a closure that fair accountability brings, perpetuating cycles of pain. And then collective empathy. Each story like Danice's challenges us to care, to act, to prevent future tragedies. When we become numb to such losses, we lose a piece of our compassion, our drive to make the world better. Danice's case reminds us that every victim is a universe of possibilities, a constellation of love and hope extinguished much too soon. Her murder is a call to action, to support survivors of domestic violence, to fund rural law enforcement, to demand accountability from those in power. It is a plea to remember her not as a statistic, but as a woman who loved fiercely, who dreamed boldly, and who deserved to live. Today, Danice's memory lives on through her family's resilience and love. Rod, Janine, Jackie, Julie, and Judy have honored her with memorials, online tributes, and unwavering advocacy for her children. Joshua and Kaylee, though deprived of their mother's presence, carry her spirit in their hearts, guided by the stories of her love. Monte Vista remembers Danice as the daughter of the San Luis Valley, her smile etched in the town's collective memory. Colorado and the world, through media like Disappeared and stories like this tribute, are reminded of the cost of violence and the need for change. Danice Lee Day was a gift to the world, a young woman whose light was extinguished by cruelty, but whose legacy endures through those who loved her. Her murder deprived us all of her laughter, her love, her potential. But it also challenges us to fight for a world where no one else suffers her fate. Let us honor Danice by remembering her, by supporting her family, and by working to ensure that no other light is dimmed too soon. In her name, let us build a future where love triumphs over violence, where justice is swift, and where every Danice can shine. As we reflect on Danice Day's story, it's hard not to feel the weight of what could have been. Danice was only 19, a young woman with dreams, talents, and 2 children she loved fiercely. She was trying to escape a toxic relationship to build a better life, but that chance was stolen from her. Her story is a reminder of the fragility of hope and the devastating impact of domestic violence and betrayal. What strikes me the most is the resilience of her family. Despite their grief, they fought for answers, keeping Danice's memory alive through websites and vigils and their unwavering love. Her sisters, Julie and Jackie, and her parents, Rodney and Janine, carried the torch for 7 years, refusing to let her be forgotten. And while Victor Braun's conviction brought some justice, it can never undo the loss. There's also a broader question here. How many other cases like Danice's remain unsolved, buried in remote places like Lyman Lake? How many families are still waiting for answers? This case shows the importance of persistence, both from loved ones and law enforcement, in bringing closure to the darkest of mysteries.
That was an incredibly heavy story, John. Danice Day's life, her light, and the tragedy that took her. It's a lot to process. Monte Vista and Lyman Lake will always be tied to her memory, places that hold both beauty and sorrow. Thank you for telling her story with the care that it deserves.
Thanks, Angela. It's stories like Danice's that remind us why we do this. To give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves, and to honor the families who keep fighting for justice. To our listeners, if this story's moved you, share it, talk about it, and keep Danice's memory alive.
Absolutely. And if you have a story you think that we should cover, or if you just want to connect with us, find us on social media or email us at info@darkdialogue.com. We're always listening.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, keep searching for the truth in the shadows, and keep the dialogue alive.